And then there were two Oscar-worthy films I've seen this year. Blue Bayou is simply phenomenal. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watch or Pass, and I'm here to talk to you about Blue Bayou, which is coming to theaters on September 17th, 2021. In short, it is a very interesting, layered, and just simply phenomenal film. I really loved it. It deals with all sorts of different, very uniquely American themes in a very American unconventional package. I really kind of can't speak enough praise about it, but quickly, it's a new film coming to theaters. It's written and directed by Justin Chon, who also stars in it as the lead character Antonio. And it also stars Alicia Vikander as Kathy, Mark O'Brien, Linh Pham, and Sydney Kowalske. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the film, and then I'm going to talk to you about four things I liked. One thing I didn't really like, but spoilers, it's not that big of a deal. The movie is really good. Just go see it. And then I'm going to talk about the ending. The film has a lot of surprises, and I'm trying to be a little vague about the story because there's a big reveal early on that kind of caught me by surprise, and I'd like it to catch you by surprise as well. So if you haven't seen the film, don't watch this yet. Go watch the movie. The story is layered and has a lot of reveals throughout. So it's really the best way to experience it if you don't have any idea going in. But if you've already seen the film, you want to just know more about it, keep watching. But I'm telling you, you should really watch the film first, experience it, and then come back. So in Blue Bayou, you have Antonio LeBlanc, who is kind of this amalgamation character. Like he's a really interesting character. He's this natively Korean man who was brought to America when he was 3 by some foster parents, but grew up in Louisiana. So he's this Korean guy with this like nice Korean face, but he's got tats. He speaks with a thick New Orleans accent. He has, doesn't know really anything about Korea. He's for all intents and purposes, he's from Louisiana. Like he is born and bred essentially. And he is in a relationship with Kathy, who's played by Alicia Vikander. And she is she's kind of the heart and soul of this family. She has a daughter from a previous relationship, but for all intents and purposes, Antonio is that daughter's father. They got together when Jessie, who's played by Sydney Kowalske, was very young, and so she's grown up with Antonio as her dad. And so they have this interesting kind of mixed race family in Louisiana, and it kind of helps deal with a lot of the subjects and a lot of the themes in this film. And then you find out early, and spoilers, that Antonio is I guess technically he is here illegally. There's an altercation. He goes to the police station, and he then gets sent to ICE because I guess when his family didn't file the right paperwork when they adopted him, so he was adopted, like fully adopted, spent 30 years in America, but I guess the paperwork wasn't right or something. There's some sort of glitch in the system, and so he is here illegally, and he didn't have any of the kind of exceptions that are there to kind of allow someone to stay. He didn't come through like a special program. He's from Korea, so there's no kind of like dire threat to his life. So it turns out he's illegally here, and he's going to get deported, and the film is about him trying to fight this. So he has some demons from his past, and then he also has a criminal record. So it's really an uphill battle for him, even though he is, at the start of the film, and for all intents and purposes, he's just a good person that has lived his entire life in America, had a few, dumb decisions, but he's trying to make a better life. And then this kind of throws a wrench in his entire world and the whole family's world. So the things I loved about this film, first, the characters. I mean, I already mentioned Antonio. The characters here have a lot of different layers, and they have a lot, each of them has much more depth than I think you would originally expect, and also much more depth than you kind of see in a normal film. So you got Antonio, who is kind of the most interesting character. He is obviously he's Korean by race, but he grew up in America. He doesn't really know much about his Korean roots, if you can call them that, because he basically left when he was 3. He is he just is kind of an amalgamation of different things. Like he is, he speaks with this thick New Orleans accent. He is a tattoo artist. He has some crime in his background. So he is just not your typical Korean protagonist. But that's what I love about this film, because it breaks a lot of barriers and presents you with a very kind of uniquely American type of character. And then you also have Kathy, who's played by Alicia Vikander, and she's kind of the heart and soul of this family. I liked her character because, she has a lot of pressure on her to, I guess, ditch Antonio, even though they're married, which is kind of it's an interesting uh, pull. Like uh, her partner or her previous partner, who is Jesse's father, that I guess stepped out on them, and she doesn't want something to do with, and then also her mom has a lot of animosity towards Antonio, and so she has a lot of pressure just kind of uh, in her family to ditch Antonio, but she stays with him because he's a good person and he's raising their daughter, and she loves him, which I really liked. I liked the kind of different influences that she had. Then you also have Jessie, who is played by Sydney Kowalske, who is just a fantastic. I mean, she is so young, but she is so natural in this role. Sometimes with child actors, they kind of try too hard, but she is just perfectly comfortable in this, and she leads to some very emotional scenes because she's a kid who is now having to deal with the only father that she's known potentially being deported. But they're also, and I'm going to go into this in the themes, but there's also some interesting dynamics with having kind of a Korean father and a white mother, and kind of how that interacts with her own personal identity. I loved all the characters. They all have layers and they all have flaws, which is an interesting aspect as well. This film is not about a perfect family or perfect characters. This is about people, this is about characters who have, demons and flaws and a background, and all sorts of differing experiences. The second thing I loved is the cinematography. The film is in, I think it's like a 4:3 aspect ratio. It's definitely not full widescreen. It looks maybe 4:3, maybe it's a little bit more stretched than that. But it definitely makes this film feel different. It lets you kind of focus on the characters because you kind of have a smaller screen to look at them, so you're focused more on the characters. And the film itself also has a lot of very beautiful, shots of Louisiana and the Bayou, and just this area that Antonio calls home, and you can tell why he loves it so much, because it's the only home he's known, but also it's very beautiful and has a lot of very beautiful shots. But it also has this effect where sometimes it'll have kind of like a smear effect on the edges, on the periphery, and it gives some of these scenes an almost dreamlike aspect. And there are some scenes that do kind of take place in Antonio's head as he's kind of dealing with some of his past demons, and that dreamlike effect helps to really kind of emphasize these scenes as well. The third thing I really love is the music. The music is, it's very understated, but also it is perfect. You've got these kind of like deep bass, I think it's a cello. You have these deep string notes. I think it's a cello that's playing during some of the more dramatic scenes, and it kind of gives you a sense of just everything that this family is dealing with. But then also during some of the lighter scenes, some of the happier scenes, you've got this lovely kind of light clarinet that plays over that, and it gives this film this wonderful kind of classical soundtrack that really helps to kind of sell the story. This film doesn't have a lot. I mean, the film has a lot of dialogue, but there's a lot of scenes that where Antonio is quiet, or he doesn't speak all the time. There's some scenes where he's kind of introspective, although or maybe just stubborn because he doesn't want to say. But you've got this soundtrack that helps to sell that drama when you don't have the characters actually speaking it. And then also there's a rendition of the title song Blue Bayou that's also very beautiful partway through. So, and the last thing I love about this film are the themes that it addresses, and this film has a lot of different themes, and they're told in a way that it doesn't feel overwhelming. Like there is some very dense storytelling because you've got these characters that have all sorts of different backgrounds, and they're dealing with different aspects of their who they are and their racial identity. But it never feels like it's trying to pile it on. It just feels like these are very complex characters, and as the film progresses, you get to experience some of the things that they're dealing with, and that's what I loved about it. It doesn't really kind of have to tell you what's going on because you experience it through the characters. So you've got like Antonio, who he is dealing with the fact that he doesn't have a relationship with his foster parents. He had kind of a rough childhood growing up. He got into some trouble. He's dealing with the fact that he's like a Korean person raising this daughter who doesn't look like him, but she's his daughter. He also has a criminal record, so he's dealing with trying to find a job and help the family with that kind of criminal record. Even though the crimes are like well in the past, it still kind of haunts him in a very early scene, which I thought was perfectly done. And then when you kind of also get the immigration aspect thrown, and then he's dealing with that as well. Kind of now he might be deported from the only country he knows, and so you've got this racial identity, and there's a really great the racial identity part is really well told through Jessie, because she has these two parents that look differently, and she is close to her dad, but she doesn't look like him, and so there's some really touching scenes where she tries to kind of help that, and I thought that those were beautiful, and then the family's reaction was also very beautiful as well. You've got the themes of kind of immigration and like what it means to be American, because you've got Antonio, who came here when he was 3, so he knows nothing about Korea and has lived his whole life here. But then he might be deported because of some paperwork, and so for all intents and purposes, he's American because he was adopted. He grew up here. You've got the possibility that he might have to go back to Korea, somewhere that he has no idea about. And then you also have kind of this overarching theme of like how you treat your fellow man, American, how you treat your fellow Americans, because Antonio is trying to do better. He's trying to kind of make a life, but he encounters all these roadblocks due to his past. And when he starts down the potential deportation process, then you also have the kind of all the impediments that are put to prevent him from being able to stay, even though he probably should stay. Like that's kind of what the theme of this is he should stay. He's got a family here. He's built a life. But because of some paperwork, he might have to go back. So I just thought that there were so many interesting themes that this film dealt with and that this film explored, and it was really well done. Like it's kind of a surprising number of themes in a surprising story with a surprising main character. And I just loved it. I loved kind of how layered it was and how dense these were, and kind of unpacking them throughout this film. And so I probably missed a bunch because this film has a lot going on. But just it is really something to behold. And then you also have the theme of redemption, specifically with kind of Ace's character, because Ace, he's a very mixed character. He's one that he kind of comes off as a little bit demanding, but then there's other scenes where it shows that he's kind of trying. And so throughout this film, he's very slowly and kind of reluctantly changes his character to kind of become the person that this family needs. Unfortunately, you'll see in the ending, some of the things don't work out as well, but his character also kind of goes through this redemptive arc. And so this, and some other characters do as well. So this film just has so much going on, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. You get to see all these very American, but also human themes, emotions, and feelings kind of coalesce into this powerful drama. So I was gonna say something I didn't like, but I don't even want to bother with that. This film is really good, and what I was gonna say it's not even worth saying. So let's go into the ending. The ending is very powerful. It's one of the most powerful endings to a film I've seen. And so what happens is Antonio is he might be deported, and so he has a hearing coming up where he can make his case for why he should stay. And the problem with Antonio is that he's not a really good candidate for this, because he's coming from Korea, so there's not really an imminent threat to him. He has a criminal record, so he's got that impediment as well. He had some felonies earlier where he, I think, boosted some bikes, boosted some motorcycles, not bikes. He also, has kids, but his spouse is an American citizen. So if he leaves, the kids are not going to be kind of left without parents. They'll be here as well. So he kind of has everything stacked against him. But he tries to kind of pull together a loose, he tries to pull together some support for his hearing. And at the hearing, only a few people show up. It's his wife, and then his friend who he used to boost bikes with, but is also just kind of like helps. He's genuinely a nice person as well. He looks out for him. And then also this ICE agent that he became close with. He does his tattoos, and so this ICE agent shows up to testify for him as well. And then you see Ace come in, and this is kind of a surprise. You wonder if he's going to like try to argue against But he kind of shows up, and when Kathy asks him why, he says, if he stays, Jessie stays, which is a nice change in his character. She was a source of some of his childhood demons, and so you weren't sure if she was going to show up, but she shows up. But on the morning of the hearing, Antonio is getting breakfast, and then as he's about to go to the hearing, he gets kidnapped by by Ace's partner, who is this kind of drunk on power, kind of dirtbag cop who gets kind of sets this whole process in motion at the start, and then feels slighted by Antonio, and so he says, like, I'm gonna get my revenge earlier. And so this is his revenge. He kidnaps him and like takes him to the woods and beats him up. And by beating him up and holding him there, Antonio doesn't get to the hearing. So afterwards, Antonio's kind of dazed because he probably has a concussion or two. But he goes to Kathy's mom's house, because at this point Kathy's living with her mom, and tries to kind of talk to her, but at this point she's done with him. And this was a scene, it's a good, powerful scene. It felt a little odd that he didn't mention anything about like what happened. He just kind of like tried to knock and said, let me in. But so I mean, I guess it wouldn't be as powerful of a story if she did let him in. But so he then kind of takes off to his favorite spot after she doesn't let him in. It's this kind of this weeping willow, I guess. It looks like a weeping willow. Maybe it's just a tree with Spanish moss on it, on the bayou, that has this kind of beautiful, calm view of the bayou. And so he goes out there and he tries to commit suicide by driving his bike into the water. And then when he's under the water, he gets a vision of his mom. So his mother abandoned him when he was very young. I think he was 3 is when he said that he came to America, but maybe he was much younger than that. And when he's underwater, she, a vision of her kind of swims up and kind of helps lead him out of the water. And then you get this scene that has been kind of hinted at throughout the movie, but you finally see what actually happened with his biological mother in Korea. And you see this beautiful little baby in this Korean kind of outfit, this Korean like baby outfit. And she tries to drown him. I guess, I don't know if she didn't, you don't really know why, but I guess maybe she wasn't ready to be a mom or whatnot. But she tries to drown him, and then, she can't go through it. You don't actually see the baby underwater, so just don't worry about that. But she can't go through it, so she, picks him up and like starts holding him. But you see kind of what happened to him as a baby, kind of the start of some of his trauma. And so, I guess after this, Antonio just decides that, and he says this before he goes into the water. He says, like, they'd be better if I left. And so at this point, he decides that he's just gonna leave and like save the family the heartache, save everyone, I guess, the pain of it. So he decides he's just gonna leave. So he sells his bike and drops the money off at Kathy's house as honest money. He made some money in dishonest ways, and that caused a rift earlier. And so he sold his bike and gave Kathy the kind of honest money. Then he goes to ICE and kind of registers for deportation. So later, Ace, who's Jesse's biological father and Kathy's kind of old partner, is driving with his current partner, who is that scumbag cop that kidnapped Antonio. And that partner, that cop, kind of brags about what he did. And he's like, basically tells Ace, like, you should be thanking me for what I did. And then he tells him how he kidnapped him. And so Ace then drives to Kathy's work, handcuffs the partner to the steering wheel, and goes and tells Kathy what happened. And then you get this really great scene where Kathy comes out and just basically beats up this cop for what he did, because essentially because of that, the hearing didn't happen, and Antonio was going to be deported. So Antonio's in immigration. So his ICE friend, who was there at the hearing, checks him out of the immigration facility and takes him to the bayou, his favorite place. And they just kind of hang out there and have this really beautiful moment where they're just kind of like sitting there. And I really liked the ICE cop, because he kind of started off as this kind of ridiculous character at the start. He's getting a tattoo from Antonio. He's getting kind of made fun of from the other tattoo people. But through the film, he kind of progresses into this really strong supporter of Antonio and this like good character. So I really liked his progression. And when they're at the bayou, he looks over at Antonio and says, essentially, like, if you were to run, I wouldn't catch you, kind of giving him the opportunity to break free. But he doesn't, because I don't think I think he realizes that wouldn't solve anything. And so he then gets taken back to ICE. So then it's the morning that Antonio is going to be deported. The cops take him, or the immigration officers take him to the airport. His ICE friend is there too, and kind of escorts him and says goodbye. And he's going to the airport. He's going to, go into the flight. And then Kathy, Jessie, and the new baby show up. So they run up to him and they embrace him and they say, we're going to. And Antonio's kind of confused. He's like, we're staying together. Um, and he says, okay. And this is where I think most Hollywood movies would end, right? You've got this kind of ridiculous, horrible situation, this impossible choice, but the family goes and they all stay together and they go to kind of confront this new challenge. But that's not this film, and that's one of the reasons this film is such a special, powerful film. So you also then have Ace show up, and he runs to the front, and I think you expect kind of him to get in an argument or try to argue with Jessie or Antonio. But he just says he wants to say goodbye to his daughter. So he, bends down, gives her a hug, and essentially says he's sorry because he walked out on her when she was very young. He kind of, I don't know if he wasn't mature enough for the family. Like, they don't really say why, but he basically abandoned her when she was young and is now trying to kind of reinsert himself into her life when she knows nothing about him. So he basically gives her a hug and says like he's sorry, and that he loves her and he'll be there when she gets back. And I really liked this as well because it showed kind of how much Ace had matured. At the start, he was kind of this, controlling type of person. He was kind of fighting with Kathy to get time with his daughter, and she wanted nothing to do with it because he'd abandoned them. But kind of throughout the film, he kind of realizes what this family needs and kind of how he can help both support his daughter and also become part of that his daughter's life. And that's by kind of not pushing and just kind of being there for the family. And so I liked that as well. I liked his maturity throughout the film. There's a lot of characters that kind of mature throughout this film. And then so Antonio sees this and he tells the family that they should stay. He tells Kathy that they should stay. And she tries to argue with him, but he basically says kind of like, I don't know anything about this place. I'm not established. So I'm going to go and get established and I'll come back for you, which maybe that's what he was playing. I can't really tell because it also feels like maybe he wants a clean break so that they can move on. He can go back and kind of leave the family to live their life because maybe he sees he's been kind of an impediment. I'm not sure. Maybe he was just going to set up and then contact them, but you just don't know, especially when you're going to a new place. He doesn't even know where he's going to be. So it's kind of a scary situation overall. Kathy doesn't really like it, but she says okay. And then he tries to give Jessie a hug, and she pulls away from him, which is kind of it's a painful scene to watch. But he doesn't push her, he doesn't like force it, which I thought was another really nice touch because it really shows how mature he is. And then so he starts to walk away, and then as he's walking away, you hear Jessie just kind of like yell "daddy," and this was one of the most powerful scenes I've ever seen because it's so heart-wrenching, and hearing her yell this and then seeing him. So she yells this and Antonio turns around and runs to her like through the ICE agents. They're trying to stop him, but he runs to her, and then they just embrace in this beautiful, painful hug for as long as they can. They kind of hold on as long as they can as the ICE agents are trying to pull him back, telling him, I think they're understanding, but they basically say you have to go. And Kathy and Ace are trying to pull her back, saying, he's got to go. But they kind of embrace as long as they can. They hold on as long as they can. And then you kind of see their hands kind of slip away. And then Antonio's led to the flight, and that's kind of where this film ends. And that scene, that scene like was very emotional. Like if you're not crying during that scene, then I don't know. Maybe it's just my life experience, but that was just a very, very tough scene to watch. And then the film ends with this montage of people. It was like 5 or 6 people that were all adopted to America when they were very young, spent time in America, and have either been deported or are facing deportation very recently. And that is again the biggest kind of tragedy of this film is you get, this film feels like this impossible situation, but then you realize that it's actually something that can happen. This idea that these people who have no knowledge or idea of their birth home being forced back and leaving the only place that they've known, And that's scary, and it's also just depressing that that would actually happen to people. Like, these Antonio and these people are all Americans for all intents and purposes, and the fact that they are forced back is scary. Like, you don't know what happens to them. I mean, like, and for in Antonio's case, he has no family in Korea that he knows of. He doesn't speak the language. Like, who knows what he's gonna do? Like, he's gonna get there and maybe be a tattoo artist. Maybe if he can, get through the language barrier, but that might be tough. Like, you just don't know what he's gonna do to establish himself. Um, and that's very scary because he has a family back home that's relying on him and loves him, and he loves them, and that his family was torn apart and then kind of told to just do what they can, and that's the ultimate tragedy of this film and why this film was such a powerful drama. So um Blue Bayou is really good. I think it's going to be Oscar worthy. I've seen two films this year that I kind of consider Oscar worthy films. You've got Coda earlier and now Blue Bayou, and it's a powerful movie. So you should definitely check it out. It's out in theaters September 17th, 2021. And thank you so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. And if you have any comments about the movie or additional thoughts, just let me know. I love discussing the film after in the comments. So I'm happy to have a conversation, and thank you so much.